The storm hit Keswick's edge with the fury that frontier worlds specialized in. Wind that could strip paint from buildings and rain that felt like being pelted with gravel. Ethan Moore secured his greenhouses and retreated to his homestead, content to spend the evening with a book and the sound of weather doing its worst against well-built walls. The pounding on his door came at 2300 hours, barely audible over the storm. Ethan opened the door and found a Velrani woman collapsed against the frame, her elegant long ears pressed flat against her skull, her clothing torn and dark with blood that was definitely not from the rain. Before he could speak, she pulled a plasma pistol with a shaking hand and aimed it at his chest. "I'm being hunted," she said, her voice steady despite obvious pain. "Every major power in the galaxy wants me dead or captured. You will hide me, or I will ensure you can never report my location. Choose now." Ethan had spent 5 years as a combat medic before he'd burned out on violence and death and retreated to this remote planet. He recognized life-threatening injuries when he saw them: plasma burns, shrapnel wounds, blood loss that meant she had minutes, not hours. "Put the weapon away," he said calmly. "You're bleeding out. I'm going to help whether you threaten me or not. Come inside before the storm makes this worse." She stared at him like he'd spoken a language her translator couldn't process. Then her knees buckled. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, weapon and all, and carried her inside. He'd kept his medical equipment from his combat days, quite bring himself to dispose of tools that had saved lives even when he'd stopped wanting to be in situations where lives needed saving. Now he pulled out the emergency trauma kit and began working with practiced efficiency. The plasma burns were severe but treatable. The shrapnel wounds were messier, multiple pieces embedded in her side and shoulder. Ethan worked carefully, extracting fragments, sealing wounds, administering the broad-spectrum alien-compatible antibiotics he kept stocked. His medical scanner beeped with biometric identification. Ethan glanced at the display and felt his hand still for just a moment. Kale, the ghost of Talvaris, most feared assassin in 7 sectors. 73 confirmed kills including 3 heads of state, 2 crime lords who'd been considered untouchable, and a military commander whose death had ended a war. She'd worked for everyone and betrayed no one. Until now, apparently. The scanner helpfully listed the bounties. The Velrani Empire was offering enough credits to buy a small moon. The Human Coalition's reward was nearly as high. Various criminal syndicates had posted their own prices. Ethan deleted the identification data and continued treating her wounds. When he finished and she was stable, barely but stable, he moved her to his guest room. It was simple: a bed, a small table, a window that currently showed nothing but storm darkness. He placed her weapons on the table beside the bed, within easy reach. She'd wake up terrified if she woke up weaponless. He'd seen enough trauma in his medic days to know that much. Ethan returned to the main room, made himself tea, and tried to process what he'd just done. He'd given shelter to the galaxy's most wanted assassin. He'd deleted identification data that would have made him wealthy. He'd put himself in the path of every major power's hunting parties. He should be terrified, should be planning how to report her location, claim the bounty, get her off his planet before people came looking. Instead, he finished his tea and went to bed. Someone had needed medical help. He'd provided it. Everything else was just complications. He'd deal with complications in the morning. In the guest room, Kale drifted in and out of consciousness, her legendary reflexes muted by pain medication and blood loss. But even in her compromised state, one thought persisted: the human hadn't been afraid. In 15 years of being the galaxy's most feared assassin, everyone had been afraid: clients, targets, allies, enemies. Fear was the constant. Fear was what she wielded as effectively as any weapon. But the human who'd opened his door to find a bleeding assassin threatening him, he'd been calm, almost bored by her threat, more concerned with her injuries than her weapon. It made no sense. Nothing about this made sense. But consciousness was fading again, and Kale let it go, surrendering to the strange safety of a stranger's home, while a storm raged outside and hunters searched for her across the galaxy. For the first time in years, she slept without planning her escape route first. Kale woke with her hand automatically reaching for the knife she kept in her left boot, a reflex trained over 15 years that expected her weapons to be taken, expected to wake to interrogation or execution, or the moment when predator became prey. Her hand found nothing. She was dressed in clean clothing that wasn't hers. Her boots were gone. She sat up fast, too fast, her injuries screaming protest, and swept the room. Small. One exit. Window too small to use effectively. Table beside the bed with her weapons. All of them. Plasma pistol, 3 knives, the monofilament garrote, even the poison capsules from her jacket lining. Laid out neatly, within easy reach. The tactical analysis section of her brain noted this was either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity. The emotional section, the part she'd spent years suppressing, didn't know what to do with being given weapons while vulnerable. The door was open. She could hear someone moving around, hear the quiet sounds of domestic routine that were utterly foreign to her experience. Kale retrieved her primary knife and moved silently toward the door. The human was in the kitchen area preparing breakfast. He glanced up when she appeared in the doorway, knife in hand, and smiled slightly. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" Kale stared at him, at his casual posture, at the complete absence of fear in his eyes despite the knife she was very obviously holding. "You left me my weapons," she said. "Yes. Figured you'd feel better with them close. I know I would in your situation." He gestured at the table. "Coffee or tea? I have both, also making eggs if you're hungry. You gave me weapons while I was unconscious and vulnerable in your home." "Yes," he repeated patiently. "You're injured and being hunted. Seemed cruel to make you feel defenseless on top of everything else. I could kill you." "You could," he agreed, cracking eggs into a pan. "But you haven't, so I'm assuming you're not planning to. If you change your mind, at least you'll be properly fed first." Kale had interrogated people who were better at hiding fear than this. She'd learned to read the microscopic signs, pupil dilation, elevated heart rate, the scent of adrenaline. The human showed none of it. He was genuinely calm. It unsettled her more than any weapon ever had. She sat down at the table, still holding the knife, and said clearly, "I'm Kale, the ghost of Talvaris. I've killed 73 people across 7 sectors. I'm wanted by every major power because I refused my last contract and killed the broker who tried to force compliance. The people hunting me will destroy this entire settlement to get to me." That sounds complicated. The human, he still hadn't offered his name, served eggs onto 2 plates. "I'm Ethan. I grow plants. Do you want toast with this?" Kale felt something close to disbelief. "Did you hear what I said?" "Yes. You're a very accomplished assassin being hunted by dangerous people. I got that from the plasma burns and the panic when you pulled a gun on me last night." He sat down across from her with his own plate. "What I'm asking now is whether you want toast with your eggs. Why aren't you afraid of me?" Ethan considered this while buttering toast. "Because being afraid wouldn't help anything. You're injured, you needed medical care, I provided it. If you decide to kill me, being afraid won't prevent that. You're clearly very skilled. And if you're not planning to kill me, fear would just make this unnecessarily uncomfortable for both of us. Most people fear me. Most people probably haven't spent 5 years as a combat medic in active war zones. Fear stops being useful when you're elbow deep in someone's chest cavity trying to keep them alive." He offered her the toast. "Eat. You've lost a lot of blood. Your body needs fuel to heal." Kale took the toast mechanically, her analytical mind trying to process this human who treated harboring the galaxy's deadliest assassin like a minor inconvenience. Over the following days, as her injuries healed, Kale observed Ethan with the same precision she'd used to study targets. He maintained a simple routine: morning work in his greenhouses, afternoon maintenance on his homestead, evenings reading or listening to music. He offered her food without demanding gratitude, changed her bandages without commentary, gave her space while remaining available if she needed anything. He didn't ask about her past, didn't press for information about who was hunting her or why, didn't try to use her presence for advantage or profit. On the fourth day, when she was well enough to move around freely, Kale found him in the greenhouse working with plants she didn't recognize. "What are these?" she asked. "Andromedon moss ferns. They're tricky, need specific humidity and light cycles, but they produce oxygen at 3 times the rate of standard terraforming plants. I'm trying to breed a strain that can survive Keswick's Edge's temperature fluctuations." He glanced at her. "You're healing well. The plasma burns are looking much better. Why are you doing this?" The question came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "Why help me? You know who I am. What I am. You could claim enough bounty to never work again. Instead, you're hiding me and discussing plant breeding." Ethan set down the plant he'd been examining. "You showed up injured and needing help. I'm capable of providing help. Everything else, your profession, the bounties, the people hunting you, those are just complications. I don't make medical decisions based on complications. I'm not a medical decision. I'm a person who's killed people." "Yes, and you're also a person who was bleeding on my doorstep during a storm. Both things can be true." He returned to his work. "If you're feeling well enough, I could use help in the greenhouse. The moss ferns need their humidity levels checked every 3 hours, and I've been doing it manually. Fresh perspective would be useful." Kale stared at him. 15 years of being the weapon everyone feared, and this quiet botanist was asking her to help with plant care. "I don't know anything about plants. I didn't know anything about plants either when I started." "You learn." He showed her the monitoring equipment. "See this reading? That's too low. Needs adjustment. Try it." And because she had nothing better to do, because his calm certainty was strangely compelling, because for the first time in her life someone was treating her like a person capable of doing something other than killing, Kale adjusted the humidity levels for Andromedon moss ferns and discovered she didn't hate it. "That's perfect," Ethan said, checking the readings. "You're good at this." "I'm good at killing," Kale corrected. "It's the only thing I've ever been good at." "You're good at learning," Ethan said, already moving to the next plant section. "You've picked up botanical concepts in minutes that took me weeks. You're good at observation. You notice details most people miss. You're good at adapting. You've adjusted to peaceful life faster than I expected. Killing is just the skill someone else decided to develop in you. It's not all you are." Kale wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was exactly what 15 years of training had made her, a weapon, a ghost, a thing that existed only to end lives. But the words stuck in her throat, and instead she followed him through the greenhouse, learning about soil composition and growth cycles, and the peculiar needs of plants from 17 different worlds. It was the calmest afternoon she'd had in 15 years. 2 weeks after Kale's arrival, a routine had developed. Mornings in the greenhouse, where Kale discovered she had an aptitude for the precise observation and care that plants required. Afternoons maintaining the homestead, repairs, system checks, the mundane work of keeping a remote settlement functional. Evenings sharing meals and comfortable silence. It should have felt wrong. Kale had spent 15 years never staying anywhere longer than necessary, never forming connections, never allowing herself the vulnerability of routine. Instead, it felt like the first time she'd stopped running. She was restocking the greenhouse water system when Ethan's early warning sensors triggered. Proximity alert from 3 incoming ships, fast approach vector, scanning patterns that indicated hunting rather than legitimate traffic. Kale's combat reflexes activated instantly. She was moving before conscious thought engaged, her mind automatically mapping defensive positions, calculating threat angles, identifying weaknesses in the homestead structure that could be exploited by attackers. "Ethan," she called, her voice carrying the command tone of someone used to combat situations. 3 ships, incoming fast. You need to hide. Use the underground storage, it's shielded. They won't detect life signs through that much reinforced concrete. Stay there until it's clear. Ethan emerged from the main house, holding a plasma rifle that Cale hadn't known he possessed. "This is my home," he said calmly. "I don't hide when dangerous people show up." "These aren't just dangerous people. These are professionals. Mercenaries hired by multiple powers to take me dead or alive. They'll kill anyone who gets in their way." Cale checked her weapons, fully loaded, ready. "I can handle this, but you need to hide. You're not fully healed. Your left side is still weak from the shrapnel wounds. You'll be fighting at maybe 70% capacity." Ethan checked his rifle with the competence of someone who knew weapons well. "You'll need support. You're a botanist." "I was a combat medic for 5 years before I was a botanist. Medics in active war zones learn to shoot back." He positioned himself near the homestead's main entrance, using the structure for cover. "Besides, you're not fully healed because of me. You've been helping with my work instead of resting properly. I'm partially responsible for your reduced capacity. I'm not letting you face this alone." The ships landed in a tactical formation that confirmed Cale's assessment. These were professionals. They deployed fast, 15 mercenaries in military-grade armor, weapons that could punch through standard building materials. Cale recognized the organization, Phantom Corps, the premier mercenary group that worked exclusively for high-value contracts. She'd crossed paths with them twice before. Both times she'd been the hunter, not the hunted. "High-value target confirmed," one of them called, their scanner having picked up Cale's biosignature despite the homestead's basic shielding. "Alive preferred, dead acceptable. Engage." What followed was what Cale did best. She moved like death itself, precise, efficient, devastating. Her first 3 shots took down the forward scouts. Her fourth disabled the team's communications array. She used the greenhouse for cover and concealment, moving between positions with the ghostly fluidity that had earned her name. The mercenaries were good. They adapted quickly, using coordinated fire patterns and tactical positioning that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But Cale wasn't most opponents. She eliminated 2 more with carefully placed shots. Disabled a third with a thrown knife that severed the connection between helmet and armor, forcing them to retreat. The remaining mercenaries regrouped, clearly reassessing their target's capabilities. Then one of them flanked wide, using the storm shelter for cover, getting a clear shot at Cale's position. The shot never came. Ethan fired first, a perfect center-mass hit that dropped the mercenary before they could squeeze the trigger. Cale spun, staring at Ethan across 30 meters of battlefield. He was calm, controlled, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Not often enough to be comfortable with it, but enough to be competent. 6 left, Ethan called, his voice steady. "They're regrouping behind their ships, probably calling for backup." "Get back inside," Cale ordered. "I can handle 6. You could have handled 15 if you were at full strength. But you're not. Your left side is compromising your movement, and they know it now. You need support whether you like it or not." The remaining mercenaries made their move, a coordinated assault meant to overwhelm through sheer firepower. Cale and Ethan responded with the unconscious coordination of people who'd spent weeks learning each other's patterns, even if those patterns had been about plant care rather than combat. When the last mercenary retreated to their ship, and the sound of engines indicated they were leaving, battered, reduced, reporting back that the contract was more complicated than anticipated, Cale and Ethan stood in the ruins of the greenhouse, both wounded, both alive. "You saved my life," Cale said, breathing heavily. "The one who flanked, I didn't see them. You've saved my life approximately 40 times in the last 15 minutes. I'm still behind on the count." Ethan sat down carefully on a bench that had somehow survived the firefight. "We should treat each other's wounds. You're bleeding again." Cale looked down and confirmed. Her left side wounds had reopened. Not severely, but enough to be concerning. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "You could have hidden. Let them take me. Been safe. Instead, you fought beside me. Because you're not just the galaxy's deadliest assassin, Ethan said, pulling out a medical kit. You're Kale. You're someone who learned about my plants. You're someone who asked questions about soil pH and growth cycles. You're someone who deserves more than being hunted forever. Something cracked in Kale's carefully constructed walls. For 15 years she'd been a weapon, a tool, a ghost that everyone feared but no one truly saw. This quiet botanist saw her, saw past the kills and the legend and the terror, saw someone worth helping, worth protecting, worth treating as a person rather than a monster. For the first time in 15 years, Kale cried, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming realization that someone had chosen to see her as more than what she'd been made into. Ethan did what he'd done from the beginning. He provided simple, non-judgmental presence. He tended her wounds while she cried, his hands steady and sure. When she finally had words again, Kale said, "They'll come back, more of them. Stronger force, they know where I am now. Then we'll deal with it when they do." Ethan finished bandaging her side. Or you disappear properly. I have contacts from my old life, people who specialize in creating new identities, relocating people who need to start over. I could reach out, help you build a life where they'd never find you. Kale considered this, considered running again, starting over somewhere new, leaving behind this quiet homestead and the human who'd shown her more kindness than she'd experienced in her entire life. "No," she said, "no. I want to stay here, learn more about growing things instead of destroying them." She met his eyes. "If you'll have me." Ethan's smile was warm and genuine. "I'd like that." The reinforcements came 3 days later, a larger force, better equipped, clearly not making the mistakes the first group had. But 3 days had given Kale and Ethan time to prepare. Ethan's homestead had been built by someone who understood defensive architecture even if he'd hoped never to need it. Hidden firing positions, reinforced structures, shielding that could be activated in sections. And Ethan had spent those 3 days teaching Kale his home secrets while she'd taught him tactical positioning and threat assessment. The second battle was harder than the first. The mercenaries had learned from their predecessors' failure. They didn't underestimate Kale this time. They used overwhelming firepower, coordinated assault patterns, and the patient tactical patience of professionals who knew their target was skilled. But they were facing 2 people now, not one. And Ethan, for all his years as a peaceful botanist, still remembered the combat medic who'd fought beside soldiers in active war zones. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, the mercenary force had retreated again, this time with severe casualties and the clear understanding that retrieving Kale alive wasn't worth the cost. In the aftermath, Ethan's homestead was damaged but standing. The greenhouse would need major repairs. Several outbuildings were destroyed, but they'd held. "They'll report back," Kale said, accepting water that Ethan offered. "Their employers will know you're here helping me. You're a target now, too." "I became a target the moment I let you in," Ethan replied. "I made that choice knowing the consequences." "Why?" The question Kale had been asking since she arrived. "Why risk everything for someone like me?" "Because 15 years ago, I couldn't save people anymore. Couldn't handle watching people die despite my best efforts, couldn't cope with the violence and the loss. I came here to grow things instead, to build life instead of watching it end." Ethan looked out at his damaged homestead. "When you showed up bleeding and hunted, I had a choice. Turn you away and be safe, or help you and risk everything. And I realized that if I turned you away, I'd be letting fear make me into someone who didn't help people who needed it. That's not who I want to be. You could have reported me, claimed the bounty, been wealthy enough to rebuild this place 100 times over. I could have. But wealth earned by betraying someone who trusted me with their life, that's not wealth, that's just expensive guilt." He smiled tiredly. "Besides, you've become a much better assistant than the money would have been. You have a real talent for greenhouse management." Kale laughed, an actual, genuine laugh. I've killed 73 people, and you're complimenting my plant care abilities. Well, you're very good at both. Doesn't mean the killing has to be the only thing that defines you. Ethan stood, surveying the damage. We should start repairs. The greenhouse took the worst of it, but the structure's sound. We can rebuild. If you're staying, you're helping rebuild, that's the deal. He offered his hand. Partners. Cale took his hand, not as a weapon this time, not as a threat, but as a genuine gesture of partnership. Partners. Though I should warn you, I've never built anything in my life. Then you'll learn, same as you learned about the plants, same as you're learning that you're more than what they made you into. Over the following months, they rebuilt. The greenhouse first, because Ethan's plants needed proper care. Then the damaged outbuildings. Then improvements to the homestead's defenses, because Cale's tactical expertise suggested modifications that would make future attacks more difficult. Word spread through the mercenary networks. The ghost of Talvaris had gone to ground on Keswick's edge, defended by someone who could match her in combat. The bounties remained posted, but fewer took the contracts. The cost-benefit analysis didn't favor the hunters anymore. Eventually, the hunters stopped coming altogether. Cale wasn't worth the casualties, especially when she'd clearly found a defensive position she wouldn't abandon. 6 months after she'd arrived bleeding on Ethan's doorstep, Cale was working in the greenhouse, her greenhouse now as much as his, when Ethan brought news. My old contact came through. New identity, clean background, documentation that would let you travel freely if you wanted. You could leave. Start over somewhere the past wouldn't follow you. Cale looked at the moss ferns she'd been tending, the same ones Ethan had been working with the day she'd first asked about his plants. They were thriving now, producing oxygen at rates that exceeded expectations. What if I don't want to leave? She asked. Then you stay, keep being my greenhouse partner, keep learning about plants. Keep being Cale, not the ghost of Talvaris. I don't know how to be anything except a weapon. You've been learning for 6 months. You know how to care for 17 species of plants. You know how to rebuild structures. You know how to share space with someone without calculating how to kill them. Ethan smiled. You're already being more than a weapon. You just haven't noticed yet. Cale set down the monitoring equipment and faced him. Why did you really help me? Truth, not the answer about choosing to help people. Ethan considered this carefully. Because I saw someone who'd been turned into something they didn't choose to be. Someone who'd spent their whole life being used as a tool. And I thought, if I can give this person a chance to be something else, even briefly, that's worth more than safety or wealth. That's actually making a difference instead of just hiding from the world and growing plants. You've made a difference, Cale said quietly. I've killed people, ended lives, been the thing parents frighten children with. And you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. That changed everything. You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to tell you that. They stood in the greenhouse, surrounded by growing things and the simple peace of cultivation rather than destruction. The galaxy's deadliest assassin and the quiet botanist who'd chosen to see her as more than a weapon. I'm staying, Cale decided. Building this life we've started, learning to grow things, being someone other than the ghost of Talvaris. Then welcome home, Ethan said. And for the first time in her life, Cale